On a treacherous rescue mission deep in the wilderness, a reclusive veteran must confront haunting memories of his fallen squad. As the storm rages and danger closes in, will his squad leader's chilling final words hold the key to survival, or will the past finally consume him? Subscribe to uncover this gripping tale of courage and redemption, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from, as we honor the strength of our veterans. Logan Pierce moved with quiet precision as he navigated the dense terrain. The forest was his sanctuary, a place where human voices and the clatter of civilization couldn't reach. The only sounds were the soft rustle of leaves underfoot and the occasional chirp of unseen birds. He had spent years learning its rhythms, each step measured, each breath steady, a habit ingrained by years of military training. Logan had traded his combat boots for hiking boots, but the discipline remained. He carried the tools of his new trade in a worn canvas backpack, his rifle replaced by a durable walking stick and a GPS device with a cracked screen. To outsiders, he was a wilderness guide, quiet, efficient, and dependable. But the truth was more complicated. The solitude wasn't a choice, it was a necessity. Logan had once been part of an elite special forces unit, the kind of team where trust and precision were the difference between life and death. But that was a lifetime ago. Back before the mission that tore everything apart. Back when they were the Iron Squad, known for their unshakable camaraderie and unmatched success rate. Now, the very word squad was a weight Logan carried silently, a shadow he could never quite escape. He stopped at the edge of a clearing, his eyes scanning the horizon. Logan's every action was deliberate, as if he were expecting an ambush, even here. That habit had saved his life once, and it was hard to shake, even now. His fingers unconsciously brushed the military patch sewn into his jacket, a faded emblem of the squad he had once led. To anyone else, it was just fabric. To Logan, it was a scar. The silence of the forest was a double-edged sword. It offered him peace, but it also amplified the whispers of the past. The cries of his squad as they fell, one by one, still echoed in his mind. He had promised his squad leader, Captain Hale, that he would survive. He had promised to remember. And yet, the memories felt heavier with each passing year. His thoughts were interrupted by the faint sound of a branch snapping nearby. Logan froze, his hand tightening on the grip of his walking stick. Instinct kicked in. His eyes scanned the underbrush, every muscle in his body coiled for action. The forest felt alive in a different way now, the air charged with an almost imperceptible tension. Then a doe emerged, its large eyes locking onto his. Logan relaxed, lowering his guard as he watched the animal retreat into the woods. His breath steadied, but his heart remained uneasy. Even in the stillness, Logan knew peace could never be trusted. Logan's moment of quiet observation ended as he continued deeper into the woods, his mind refocusing on the task at hand. The radio on his belt crackled softly, pulling him back into the present. A voice, clipped and tense, came through. "Logan, this is base camp, over. You there?" He unclipped the radio, raising it to his lips. "Yeah, I'm here. What's the situation?" "Got a call from the ranger station. Group of hikers overdue by almost a day now. Looks like they wandered off the trail after the storm. Local authorities are stretched thin. You up for it?" Logan didn't hesitate. "Send me the coordinates." "Copy that. Sending now. You're our best shot, Logan." He grunted in acknowledgement and clipped the radio back to his belt. His GPS buzzed as the coordinates uploaded. He scanned the map quickly. The area wasn't far, but it was rugged. Steep inclines, thick underbrush, and enough hidden hazards to test even a seasoned outdoorsman. He could guess how easily inexperienced hikers could get in trouble there. Adjusting his pack, Logan set off at a brisk pace. As the forest closed in around him, his thoughts drifted. Rescue missions weren't new to him. Even in his Special Forces days, his squad had been called on to locate the lost or extract the stranded. Those missions had always been complicated, but at least then he'd had his brothers at his side. Now, it was just him. The first sign of trouble appeared half an hour into the trek. A discarded water bottle lay partially buried in the dirt, its surface scratched and mud-streaked. Nearby, faint footprints crisscrossed the trail, evidence of panic and indecision. Logan crouched, studying the tracks. At least 4 people moving erratically. The weight in his chest grew heavier. He pressed forward, following the trail of disturbance through the dense forest. The terrain grew steeper, forcing him to rely on his walking stick for balance. As he climbed, a nagging voice in the back of his head whispered reminders of the squad mates he couldn't save. But he silenced it. This was now, and these hikers needed him. A distant cry broke the silence, faint but unmistakable. Logan froze, ears straining to catch the direction. It came again, sharper this time. Someone yelling, their voice carrying desperation. He pushed forward, his pace quickening as the cries grew louder. They weren't far now. "Hang on," Logan called, his voice steady but forceful. "I'm coming." Logan pushed through the dense foliage, his steps sure despite the uneven terrain. The cries grew clearer, interspersed with muffled voices that sounded strained but alive. Relief mixed with urgency as Logan climbed a small ridge and peered over the edge. Below, huddled in a shallow gully, was the group of hikers. "Down here," a young man shouted, waving an arm frantically. His face was pale, streaked with dirt, and his expression teetered on the edge of panic. Logan surveyed the scene quickly. 4 people, 2 men and 2 women. One woman sat with her leg outstretched, her ankle visibly swollen. A middle-aged man crouched beside her, holding her hand and whispering something to calm her down. The second man paced nearby, gripping a flashlight as though it were a lifeline, while the other woman held a map, her hands trembling as she traced a path repeatedly. "Everybody okay?" Logan called as he descended into the gully, his voice calm but commanding. The group's attention snapped to him. The pacing man stopped, his eyes wide with relief. "Are you the ranger?" "Wilderness guide," Logan corrected, scanning them for injuries. "What happened?" The man kneeling by the injured woman spoke up. "We got off the trail last night, tried to backtrack, but it was too dark. He gestured to the injured woman, tripped on a root this morning. Can't put weight on her ankle. Storm hit us hard," the younger man added, his voice shaky. "We lost our bearings." Logan nodded, dropping his pack and pulling out a first aid kit. "Let me take a look," he said, crouching beside the injured woman. She winced as he gently examined her ankle. "Looks like a sprain. I'll wrap it for now, but you'll need a proper doctor to check it out." "Can we make it back?" the older man asked, his tone desperate. "We've been out here almost 2 days." Logan looked at the group, exhaustion written on their faces, supplies clearly dwindling. "We can," he said firmly, "but it's going to take focus and teamwork. Stick with me, and we'll get you out." He stood, securing the woman's ankle with a makeshift splint and instructing the others to redistribute her load. "We'll need to move slowly," Logan continued. "I'll carry her when we hit the rough spots." For the first time since arriving, Logan noticed a patch on the young man's backpack, a military insignia. His brow furrowed, but he said nothing, pushing the thought aside for now. There would be time for questions later. Right now, they needed to move. "Let's go," Logan said, his voice steady. "Follow me." Logan led the group carefully along the narrow trail he had scouted earlier. Each step was deliberate, his instincts honed from years of navigating far more dangerous terrain. Behind him, the hikers followed in single file, their movements hesitant but growing steadier under Logan's guidance. "Keep your weight low on the uneven sections," Logan instructed. "Step where I step, and if you feel unsteady, call out." The injured woman, Melanie, leaned heavily on Logan's shoulder as they navigated a tricky incline. Her pain was evident, but she bit back complaints, her determination outweighing her discomfort. Logan admired her resolve, though he kept a close eye on her condition. As they climbed, the young man with the military patch, Eric, moved up alongside Logan. "You're ex-military, aren't you?" Eric asked, his voice quiet. Logan shot him a glance, caught off guard by the question. "What makes you say that?" he asked, his tone even but guarded. "The way you lead," Eric replied. "The calm under pressure. My uncle was the same. He always said that kind of confidence doesn't come naturally. It's earned. Logan didn't respond immediately, his gaze fixed on the trail ahead. "Your uncle," he said after a pause. "Was he military?" "Yeah," Eric said with a nod, his voice tinged with pride. "Captain Hale, he was in Special Forces. He didn't make it back." Logan froze mid-step, his breath catching for a moment. "Captain Hale?" The name struck him like a physical blow, memories flooding back unbidden. He quickly masked his reaction, resuming his steady pace. "Sounds like he was a good man," Logan said quietly. "The best," Eric replied, oblivious to Logan's inner turmoil. "He talked about his squad all the time, said they were like family." Logan nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He couldn't afford to let emotions cloud his focus. Not now. "That kind of bond is rare," he said simply. The group reached a flat clearing, and Logan signaled for a break. As the hikers sat down to rest, he walked to the edge of the clearing, his hands gripping his walking stick tightly. He stared out at the horizon, the weight of the conversation pressing on his chest. Captain Hale, the man who had led Logan's squad, the man whose last words still echoed in Logan's mind. "Never let them forget who we were." Those words had been a command and a plea, and Logan had carried them ever since. Taking a deep breath, Logan turned back to the group. They needed him now, and for their sake, he couldn't falter. The hikers were exhausted but eager to continue. Logan, however, knew they needed the break. He had learned long ago that pushing too hard in a dangerous situation only led to mistakes, and mistakes could be fatal. The clearing they had stopped in offered a rare moment of openness in the otherwise dense forest, sunlight filtering down through the towering trees. As the group sat catching their breath, Logan moved among them, silently assessing their condition. Melanie's ankle was holding up better than he had anticipated, but her face was pale, and beads of sweat dotted her forehead. He knelt beside her, pulling a water bottle from his pack and handing it to her. "Drink," he instructed, "small sips." She nodded, her gratitude evident even though she was too tired to speak. Logan adjusted the makeshift splint on her ankle, checking for any signs of worsening swelling. Satisfied it was stable for now, he stood and turned his attention to the others. Eric was pacing again, his steps agitated. Logan placed a hand on his shoulder, stopping him mid-stride. "You need to conserve your energy," Logan said firmly. "We've got a long way to go." Eric nodded reluctantly, but Logan could see the questions in his eyes, the ones he hadn't asked yet. Logan had no intention of offering answers, not now. The last thing he needed was to dredge up memories of Captain Hale while trying to keep these people safe. The other man, who had introduced himself as Tom, was crouched near a small cluster of wildflowers, staring intently at his hands. Logan noticed the trembling in his fingers and the way his breathing was uneven. He crouched down beside Tom. "Talk to me," Logan said, his voice calm. Tom looked up, startled. I've never been this far off the grid before. I keep thinking about what could have happened if we didn't find you." Logan nodded, letting the man speak. "It's normal to feel that way," he said. "Fear is part of survival. It means you're paying attention. Just don't let it control you." Tom seemed to draw strength from Logan's words, his breathing steadying. Logan patted his shoulder before standing. "We'll get through this, one step at a time." As the group began to prepare for the next leg of the journey, Eric approached Logan again. This time, he held something in his hand, a dog tag. Logan's breath hitched as he recognized the name etched into the metal. Captain Daniel Hale. "He gave this to me when I was a kid," Eric said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Said it would remind me to be brave." Logan stared at the dog tag, memories swirling in his mind. He could almost hear Hale's voice again, steady and resolute, as they faced impossible odds. "Never let them forget who we were, Logan. Promise me that." The weight of those words felt heavier than ever. Logan closed his eyes for a moment, then looked at Eric. "He was a good man," Logan said softly. "The best leader I ever knew." Eric studied Logan, the pieces slowly clicking together in his mind. "You knew him," Eric said, realization dawning. You were in his squad." Logan didn't respond immediately, his gaze fixed on the dog tag. Finally he nodded. "Yeah, I knew him. And he knew how to lead men through hell and back." Eric's expression shifted, respect mixed with curiosity. Before he could ask more, Logan spoke. "We need to keep moving. It's a long way out and we don't have time to waste." The conversation ended, but the air between them had changed. Logan's connection to Hale was no longer just a memory. It was alive, carried in the presence of Hale's nephew. And with every step they took deeper into the wilderness, Logan felt the weight of his promise growing heavier. Logan led the group through a section of dense forest where the trail had all but disappeared, the ground uneven and covered with roots. The hikers were struggling now, their earlier bursts of energy replaced by fatigue. The sun hung lower in the sky, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly across the forest floor. Logan kept his pace steady, his mind already calculating their next move. "We'll stop again in about an hour," he called back to the group. "But we need to clear this stretch first. Keep your steps light and don't rush." Melanie, supported by Tom, winced with every step, but she didn't complain. The group had begun to trust Logan's leadership implicitly, following his instructions without question. Eric stayed close to Logan, occasionally casting him glances as if searching for more pieces of the puzzle about his uncle. The terrain grew steeper, and Logan stopped at the base of a rocky incline. "We'll take this slow," he said, turning to the group. "The rocks are loose, so test your footing before putting weight down." As they began their climb, a faint rumble echoed through the trees. Logan froze, his instincts immediately on high alert. The sound grew louder, a low, ominous growl that sent a chill down his spine. "Rock slide," Logan said sharply. "Move, now!" The hikers scrambled to follow his command, their earlier fatigue forgotten as adrenaline took over. Logan stayed at the rear, urging them forward as the rumbling grew into a deafening roar. He could feel the vibrations in the ground, the rocks above dislodging and crashing down in a deadly cascade. Eric, who had been helping Melanie, slipped on a loose rock and fell hard, twisting his ankle. Logan was on him in seconds, pulling him to his feet. "Lean on me," Logan barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We're almost clear." The group reached the top of the incline just as the first wave of rocks thundered past below them. Dust filled the air, choking and blinding them, but they were safe, at least for the moment. Logan set Eric down gently, quickly assessing his injury. "It's not broken," Logan said, his tone brisk. "You can still walk, but it'll hurt." Eric nodded, his jaw clenched against the pain. "I can manage," he said through gritted teeth. Logan looked at the group, their faces pale and drawn. The near-miss had shaken them, but there was no time for fear to take root. "We'll camp here for the night," Logan announced. "It's too dangerous to keep going in the dark." The hikers set about making camp under Logan's direction, gathering branches for a fire and laying out their sparse supplies. Logan worked in silence, his thoughts racing. The rockslide was a stark reminder of how quickly the wilderness could turn deadly. It was also a reminder of the mission that had taken Captain Hale and the rest of the squad, a mission that had gone wrong just as suddenly and just as violently. As the fire crackled to life, Eric sat down beside Logan, wincing as he adjusted his leg. "That was close," Eric said, his voice low. Logan nodded, staring into the flames. "Closer than I'd like," he replied. For a moment neither spoke. The night was quiet now, the chaos of the rockslide a fading memory. Eric broke the silence. "I'm glad you're here. I don't think we'd have made it without you." Logan didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was heavy. "It's not just me keeping you alive, it's everything I've learned from men like your uncle." Eric looked at Logan, his expression thoughtful. "What happened to them, to your squad?" Logan's grip tightened on the walking stick in his hand, the memories too raw to voice fully. "We made choices," he said simply. "Some of us came back, some didn't." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Logan stood abruptly, his gaze sweeping the darkened forest. "Get some rest," he said gruffly. "We'll move at first light." As he walked to the edge of the camp, the firelight casting his shadow long and thin against the trees. Logan couldn't shake the feeling that the past was catching up to him faster than he'd expected, and this time he wasn't sure he could outrun it. The campfire crackled softly, its warm glow casting dancing shadows against the towering trees. Logan stood just beyond its circle of light, his silhouette blending into the darkness as he scanned the forest. His senses were heightened, every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig pulling his focus like a taut wire ready to snap. The hikers were resting now, exhaustion overtaking their earlier fear. But Logan couldn't relax, not yet. Eric's voice broke the quiet. "You're not going to sleep, are you?" Logan turned to see Eric sitting up, his injured leg stretched out and propped on a makeshift cushion. His face was drawn, but there was a determined gleam in his eyes. Logan shook his head. "Not tonight. Someone has to keep watch." Eric hesitated before speaking again. "Was it always like this? When you were out there with my uncle?" Logan moved closer to the fire, crouching down to stoke the flames. He didn't answer immediately, weighing how much to share. "We learned early on that the quiet is when you need to be most alert," he said finally. "That's when things go sideways." Eric nodded, his gaze fixed on the firelight. "He used to say that too, that the stillness before the storm was the most dangerous part." Logan's lips tightened into a thin line. Captain Hale's wisdom had always been hard-earned, and it came flooding back now, unbidden. He could almost hear Hale's voice, calm and commanding in the moments before their final mission, a voice that had carried them through so many impossible situations. "Your uncle was a good leader," Logan said quietly. "He cared about his men, made sure we always had each other's backs. That's why we trusted him." Eric shifted, adjusting his position as he studied Logan's face. "What happened on that mission? The one where he—" Eric trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. Logan stared into the fire, the orange and yellow flames reflecting in his eyes. For a long moment he didn't speak. The memories came rushing back. The ambush, the chaos, the deafening sound of explosions, and the sight of his squad falling one by one. Hale's last words, spoken with a grim resolve, echoed in his mind. "Never let them forget who we were, Logan. Promise me that." "We were outnumbered," Logan said finally, his voice low and measured. "It was supposed to be a routine operation, but everything went wrong. We walked into an ambush, and not all of us made it out." Eric didn't press for more, sensing the weight of the memories Logan carried. "He always said his squad was like family," Eric said. "It sounds like he meant it." Logan nodded, his jaw tightening. "We were. Still are in a way." The quiet stretched between them, broken only by the crackling fire. Logan stood, his movements deliberate as he adjusted the branches feeding the flames. "Get some rest," he said, his tone soft but firm. "We've got a long way to go tomorrow." Eric leaned back, his gaze still on Logan. "Thanks," he said after a pause, "for helping us, and for telling me about him." Logan didn't respond, but he gave a slight nod before turning back to his post at the edge of the camp. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees whispering secrets carried by the wind. Logan's grip on his walking stick tightened. He had kept his promise to Captain Hale all these years, but tonight, with Hale's nephew among the group he was leading, that promise felt heavier than ever. As the hikers drifted into restless sleep, Logan remained vigilant, his eyes scanning the darkness. The wilderness was quiet now, but he knew better than to trust the silence. Somewhere out there, danger was waiting, and this time, Logan wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting to protect Hale's legacy. One step at a time. Dawn broke over the forest in muted shades of gray and gold, the sunlight barely piercing the thick canopy above. Logan stood at the edge of the camp, his arms crossed as he scanned the horizon. The events of the previous day weighed on him, but there was no time to dwell. The hikers stirred awake one by one, their faces showing a mix of weariness and determination. They were holding together, for now. "We've got a steep climb ahead," Logan said as they gathered around the remnants of the campfire. "The trail will get narrow, and there's some loose rock. Stay close and keep your footing steady." Melanie winced as she tested her ankle, but she nodded. "I'll manage," she said, her voice resolute. Eric moved beside her, his injured leg slowing him slightly but not enough to keep him from helping. Tom and Sarah, the other two hikers, shared a glance but remained silent. Logan could see the unspoken worry in their eyes. They were starting to feel the gravity of their situation. "Let's move," Logan said, taking the lead. The group pressed on, the trail winding upward through rugged terrain. The morning air was crisp, and every step felt heavier than the last. Logan's mind drifted as he navigated the terrain, his thoughts returning to Captain Hale and the ambush that had shattered their squad. The forest around him seemed eerily similar to the landscapes they had traversed on that fateful mission, every sound and shadow stirring memories he'd tried to bury. Eric's voice pulled him back to the present. "Logan? Hold up." Logan turned, seeing Eric pointing to something ahead. In the distance, the trail narrowed dangerously, a sharp drop on one side and a steep incline on the other. The rocks looked unstable, and a misstep could send someone tumbling. Logan approached the section cautiously, testing the ground with his walking stick. The rocks shifted slightly under pressure, but they held. "Single file," he instructed. "Take it slow. I'll guide Melanie across." As Logan helped Melanie navigate the treacherous section, Eric followed closely, his grip on the rock wall firm despite his injured leg. Halfway across, a sudden crack echoed through the forest, a rock breaking loose above them. Logan's head snapped up as the boulder tumbled down toward the trail. "Rove!" he shouted, pushing Melanie forward and bracing himself against the wall. The boulder crashed onto the trail, sending smaller rocks scattering. One hit Logan's shoulder, knocking him off balance, but he caught himself just in time. "You okay?" Eric asked, his voice tight with concern. Logan nodded, rolling his shoulder to shake off the pain. "Keep going," he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. "We're almost through." The group reached the other side, their breaths heavy with relief. Logan checked on each of them, ensuring no one was hurt before they continued. The narrow pass behind them, they moved into a dense section of forest where the trees closed in, the air growing cooler and darker. Logan's grip on his walking stick tightened as his eyes scanned the trail ahead. The hikers were relying on him, and he wouldn't let them down. Not again. The group pressed forward into the darker, denser part of the forest, where the canopy thickened and allowed only shards of sunlight to pierce through. The air grew cooler, carrying a dampness that hinted at an unseen stream nearby. Logan moved ahead, his senses sharper than ever. This was the kind of environment where complacency could get someone hurt, or worse. Behind him, the hikers trudged along, their earlier nervous chatter replaced by quiet focus. Melanie limped slightly, but she refused help, her resolve as strong as it was the day before. Eric, however, was visibly struggling. His ankle was swelling, and every step seemed to cost him more effort. Still, he kept moving, his eyes fixed on Logan, as though drawing strength from him. "We'll stop soon," Logan said, his voice breaking the silence. "There's water ahead. We can refill and rest." Tom exhaled in relief. "Thank God," he muttered, gripping a tree for balance as they paused briefly. Sarah offered him a reassuring look, but Logan noticed the fatigue in her movements as well. The trail dipped sharply, leading them to a small stream that trickled over smooth stones. The sound of running water was soothing, cutting through the tension that had built over the hours. Logan crouched by the edge, filling his canteen and motioning for the others to do the same. "This is as close to fresh as you're going to get," Logan said. "Drink up. You'll need it." As they sat by the stream, Logan's thoughts drifted again. He couldn't help but notice the parallels between this trek and his last mission with Hale. Back then, their squad had found a similar stream during an ambush retreat. Hale had kept them moving, even as exhaustion threatened to break them. Logan could still hear Hale's voice, calm and firm. "Stay focused. We don't stop until we're clear." Eric's voice interrupted his thoughts. "You've been quiet." Logan glanced at him, then back at the stream. "Just thinking." "About my uncle?" Eric asked, his tone careful but curious. Logan hesitated, then nodded. "A lot of what I know, I learned from him. He never backed down even when things got bad." Eric's expression softened. "He said the same about you." that you were someone he trusted with his life." Logan's jaw tightened, the weight of those words pressing on him. "It wasn't enough," he muttered under his breath. Eric started to respond, but before he could, a sharp noise cracked through the forest, branches snapping in the distance. Logan's head shot up, his body tensing. He motioned for the group to stay quiet, his hand instinctively moving to the knife strapped to his belt. "What is it?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Logan raised a hand to silence her, his eyes scanning the tree line. The forest, once filled with the soothing sounds of the stream, seemed unnervingly still now. He didn't know what or who was out there, but every instinct told him to be ready. "Stay close," Logan said in a low voice, "and don't make a sound." As the group huddled together, the forest seemed to close in around them. Logan took a deep breath, his grip on his walking stick firm. Whatever was coming, he would face it head on. He had made that promise once before, and this time he wouldn't fail. Logan's breath steadied as he moved silently toward the source of the sound, every step deliberate and measured. The hikers remained huddled by the stream, their fear palpable. He could feel their eyes on him, their unspoken hope that he would somehow make everything safe again. The snapping of branches came again, closer this time. Logan knelt behind a tree, scanning the underbrush. His sharp gaze caught movement, a blur of fur darting between the trees. A wave of tension released from his shoulders as a small deer bounded into view, its movements jerky and startled. He stood slowly, signaling back to the group that it was safe. "It's just a deer," he said as he returned to the stream. "Let's keep moving." Relieved but still rattled, the group gathered their belongings and followed Logan back onto the trail. The air remained heavy with unease, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. Logan couldn't shake the feeling that something was out of place, but he didn't let it show. The hikers needed his calm, not his doubt. As they trekked on, Eric limped alongside Logan, his voice low. "You always this jumpy?" Logan shot him a sidelong glance. "Jumpy keeps you alive." Eric nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Sounds like something Uncle Danny would have said." The mention of Hale's name hit Logan like a punch to the gut, but he didn't let it show. Your uncle was right more often than not. The trail opened up into a clearing, the sun breaking through the canopy to light their path. Logan called for another short break, his instincts telling him to use every opportunity to regroup. As the group settled, Eric lowered himself onto a log, wincing as he adjusted his injured leg. "What do you think about them?" Eric asked suddenly, his voice barely audible. "Your squad, I mean." Logan's jaw tightened. He didn't answer right away, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Every day," he said finally. "Every single day." Eric looked at him, his expression softening. "He'd be proud of you, you know." Logan didn't respond, but the words stayed with him. He turned away, his eyes scanning the tree line as though searching for something, or someone, he knew he would never find. The memory of Captain Hale's last words resurfaced, clear and sharp in his mind. "Never let them forget who we were." The group began to stir, and Logan signaled for them to move out. They were nearing the end of the trail, the landscape shifting to more familiar terrain. Relief mingled with exhaustion as the hikers realized they were close to safety. As they reached the edge of the forest, the group paused. Eric turned to Logan, his expression serious. "Thanks for everything, not just for getting us out of here, but for keeping his memory alive." Logan met Eric's gaze, the weight of his promise settling over him once again. "It's what he would have done for me." Eric nodded, understanding more than Logan expected. The hikers stepped into the open field ahead, the forest behind them now a shadowy memory. Logan lingered for a moment, his hand brushing the patch on his jacket, the last remnant of the squad that had shaped him. He took a deep breath and followed the group, the weight of the past still heavy but no longer unbearable. He had kept his promise, and in doing so he had ensured that Captain Hale and the men they had lost would never be forgotten.